We are happy to announce our keynote speaker. Margarita Quihuis is a behavior design research at the Behavior Design Lab and co-director of the Peace Innovation Lab, both at Stanford University and director at the Peace Innovation Institute in The Hague. She is one of the world's leading experts on behavior design and persuasive technology for social good. Her presentation will try to answer these questions. What is the value of creating trust, respect, and passion for products, services, and how can that affect your bottom line? How can you improve people's social behavior, especially their ability to collaborate and innovate with each other? And how can we use behavior design and emerging technologies ethically to create the society we want? Give her a warm welcome, Margarita Quihuis.
Good morning, everyone. What a privilege to be here. I have to tell you that I was up until 2 o'clock in the morning. I had a wonderful dinner with the conference organizers, learning more about you and Norway and the history and everything. And I'm going like, oh, I need to incorporate this in my talk. So I'm working away at 2 o'clock in the morning. I go, I think I got it. And then I wake up this morning and I'm there and I'm going like, no. Tear it up. Start all over again. For those, how many of you came to Stanford last year? A few of you did. So, all right, that 6 hours that I did, okay, it's not going to happen in 30 minutes, just so you know. But what I am going to do is talk a little bit about our work, give you a tool, just one tool, and then talk about trust and a call to action for you. So, for those of you who were at Stanford, you know that I like to get stuff done. I push you through some rigorous thinking, but the bottom line is that everything that we do should be designed with some sort of impact. Everything that we do should have some sort of intentionality. Otherwise, we're just wasting our time. So, now that you know a little bit of bias about me, let's get started. So, what we do in my lab, we work on these things in terms of behavior design, persuasive tech, and so on. But really what we care about is how to make the world a better place using behavior design and persuasive technology. Now, God knows I'm from Silicon Valley. Let me tell you right now, I'm not here to save you. All right? Typically, when someone comes from Silicon Valley, we have a lot of arrogance and confidence thinking that, you know what, you guys are all broken. You're all behind. We know how to innovate, we know how to disrupt things, and if you're not doing that, something's wrong with you. Let me tell you, from the land where we work, we move fast and break things, we have a lot of broken china right now, and it's not pretty. As I'm sure you well know, we're in the process of breaking democracy, we're breaking trust in institutions, we have somehow inadvertently allowed our technology to weaponize freedom of speech, all those things. So we have a lot of issues. And in fact, what I'm really curious about is how we can learn from you. Because I'm convinced that the rest of the world has far more wisdom about how we're going to navigate the future than Silicon Valley does right now. Okay? So I'm going to tell you that. But that said, we do very clever things. So in my lab, we've been looking at social media. We've been looking at emerging technologies. We've been looking at how technology changes behavior at scale. So how many of you were alive in 2007? What were you doing in 2006? And what changed in 2007? Right? This thing, right? There's this very clear inflection point in society pre-2007, post-2007. It's sort of like 80, AC, BC, AC. And so all of a sudden the world is different. And there was a ton of optimism about the potential of these technologies to make the world a better place. And obviously that hasn't played out. In my lab, we still think that that's possible, but it requires additional thought. And this is where we think about behavior. And why do we care about this? Because we're in this era of mass interpersonal persuasion. We have sensors everywhere. So in 2007, this was a big deal, but now we have Internet of Things. We live in a surveillance society. All these things are going to happen. How do we design these technologies in a way that have maximum social benefit? And that in a way that we can elevate people so they can be their best selves. We believe that's possible, and that's what our lab aims to do. So in our lab, and oh my God, I'm looking at the time. We have 3 things that we focus on. So we have 3 legs to our stool, and then we have 2 efforts. The first one is we want to catalyze a peace tech industry, right? So all this stuff needs to change so that it has the positive social impact that we want. The next thing is we need to create frameworks and curriculum for safe and ethical deployment of technology, because guess what? In Silicon Valley, we have no sense of ethics. We have no moral code. We're libertarians. We think people should be able to do anything they want, and we don't think that technology has a bias. That, as you know, is bullshit. It does have a bias. It does have a point of view. It does have a perverse moral code, if you will, because it's not been well thought out. And so what we're looking to do is how do we change that? And that is going back to the very beginning of engineering education, entrepreneurial education, and changing what success is. So at Stanford, we have lots of freshmen who come in, bright, shiny faces. They want to make the world a better place, but they also want to have their IPO and become a billionaire. Half of our incoming freshman class want to be entrepreneurs. How can we, in the 4 years that we have them at Stanford, say, you know what, that old model of success is out of fashion. What we want you to do is create technologies that will actually solve real-world problems and global challenges. Please, we do not want you to come and say, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a scooter company that doesn't do anything for anyone, but ends up with a lot of scooters in a landfill, right? So we need to redefine what success means. And we think that going back to fundamentals is necessary for that. And the next thing we need to do is establish a market signal for the value of peace. Because if there's no value to peace, no one will invest in it. Just as the environment for so long was considered an externality, how do you value water? How do you value clean air? When there was no tradable currency around that, we did not invest in it. We did not preserve it. Now we have carbon credits. Hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years, we will be able to develop some sort of a peace credit where we can incentivize and reward companies and organizations for the positive things they're doing in the world. That's measurable, all right? So that's what we do. But for all of you who ever had a PhD, you know the hardest part of coming up with your dissertation is figuring out what your question is, all right? So the last 10 years, we've been figuring out what is our question. And our question fundamentally is, how good can we be to each other? It's kind of a simple statement, but it's very, very deep. Because when we start thinking about how good we can be to each other, how good can you be to her? How good can you be to your community? How good can we be to the environment? How good can we be to our customers, our employees, our stakeholders? All of a sudden there's a shift. And that shift comes in terms of behavior. So here's our toolkit. Our mentor is BJ Fogg at Stanford. He founded the field of persuasive technology. He's developing the field of behavior design. This is all very new. So you're not going to find any business books about persuasive tech or behavior design at the airport. That said, BJ's book on behavior design is coming out next year. We look at persuasive tech, and then we look at data. And particularly, we have a lens in terms of looking at any kind of behavior data and looking at the positive or negative social interactions between 2 individuals. So there's that. So, all right, here's the tool. So for those of you who are at Stanford, you remember I was here on the easel. I don't have markers and an easel, so I have to do it through slides. So typically, when people want to do something, they go, I want to have an innovative culture. I want to increase employee engagement. I want to have everyone in Norway be healthy. That's very, very vague. It's very, okay, so tomorrow you're going to go back to your team and you're going to say, okay, we're going to start being an innovative culture. And you go, okay, what do you do? What do you do? There's no action. There's nothing that's crisp. And so part of what we do is we go through this process because people don't know what they want. Or if they do what they want, it's very vague and very fuzzy. And how do you know when you've gotten there? How do you know when you've had success? So we have this technique called magic wanding. Take good notes. So imagine if you had a magic wand and you could get any kind of behavior, any kind of thing, what would that be? Right? And so this is to get you to not think about, oh, that's impossible, that's impractical, oh, that's too hard, we don't have the political will, blah, blah, blah. We take all those arguments off the table and just say, if we had a magic wand, what would we want? Right? What would your behavior be? And usually it's something really, really fuzzy. And as for those of you who know at Stanford, you gave me like really fuzzy things, and I go, all right, let's make it into a specific behavior. And what you start doing is this technique called swarm of bees, right? So this is a way to think about how to break down these challenges. And you start thinking about a specific behavior. So if we thought about something like wellness, what would be a specific behavior that you could get wellness in your organization? So people can call out. This will make it a little bit interactive. So what would we do? What would be a behavior? If you wanted to do a program about wellness in your organization. All right, you're taking notes. Tell me. I'm just calling you. Massage. Okay, massage. What else? Yeah, I know you got to pay attention. I do this at Stanford. Okay. What do you think? What would be a behavior that you could do that would increase wellness in your employee group? Better food, okay. So we have massage, we have better food. All right, okay, you're a ringer, you know, tell me. Yeah. Exercise, okay, so we have, exercise, better food, massage. And you go, okay, well, and you guys are doing pretty good, because usually I still get things that are very aspirational. Like, well, then it's still vague. So what you want to do is you get very specific and say, okay, massage, great. So who's going to get the massage? How frequently are they going to do it? And how do we know when they got it done? If they're going to eat good food, how do we get that more specific? When you say good food, what do you mean by good?
Maybe healthy food.
Okay, when you say healthy food, what do you mean by healthy?
Fish.
Fish. Okay, so you want people to eat more fish. All right, cool. It's Norway, of course. Salmon. So, yeah, okay. Okay, I think that's an attainable KPI. So we want Norwegians to eat more salmon. We want Norwegian journalists to eat more salmon. Awesome. Now you're getting specific, right? And you say, okay, I want Norwegian journalists to eat more salmon. How often? 3 times a week. Awesome. Okay, so then you could develop a program in your organization saying, I want my journalists to eat salmon 3 times a week. And you could test that. If you wanted to do wellness, and you guys know my yoga example, we say, we want young women in the organization to do yoga 20 minutes a week, 3 times, right? You could put that out there and test it. And then you could find out if the young women want to do it. Now, I had one group of Norwegians, not you guys, and it was very interesting because the women said, yes, we want yoga, and the guys were like this. And you go like, okay, if we did an employee wellness program based on yoga in this organization, it would fail with all the men because they're not interested, right? So one of the challenges in any kind of aspiration, as we break down all the possible things that we could do to achieve that vague goal, is that you have to match the behavior with the individuals, with that demographic. Right? So if you're thinking in your world in terms of media, you might say, okay, I want to increase subscriptions in Norwegian, in the Norwegian community. And I go, okay, great, but who? Are we talking about seniors? Are we talking about married women? Are we talking about millennials? Do we want to create a program for teens? Once you start getting very, very specific, you can start playing around with the variables of what works and how to make that happen. So, swarm of bees, we're getting something vague to getting something a little bit more crisp. But when we talk about behavior, if you were at Stanford, I'd have you all be taking notes because in 3 minutes, one of you would come up and explain this, but I won't do that with this group. Behavior is comprised of 3 components: motivation, the ability or some sort of prompt. And that's it. That's all we've got to work with. All right? So we're not talking about nudging. We're not talking about incentives. We're not talking about any of that. This is it. And we have, this is the model that emerged in 2009. And it's the model that's been used quite a bit in technology. So here we go. So motivation, low motivation to high motivation, ability. The thing is hard to do versus the thing is easy to do. You have prompts. Anything that has a prompt, if you have sufficient ability and sufficient motivation, it'll happen. You don't have enough motivation, it's not going to happen. You don't have enough ability, it's not going to happen. All right, so here we go. Thought exercise. The phone rings. You answer the phone. Why do you answer the phone? Okay, you have motivation, ability, and prompt. Why do you answer the phone? Tell me. All right, this isn't hard. Come on. Yeah, it's easy, but why do you answer it? Okay, so one, we answer the phone because it rings. We got a prompt. Ring, ring. Oh, I got to answer the phone, right? It's easy. It's okay. I answer the phone. The phone rings and I answer it. Why do I answer it? I look at it and I go, oh, it's someone I want to talk to. I'm motivated. Hello? The phone rings and I answer it. Why do I do that? Oh, it's close by. The phone rings and I don't answer it. How often do you get a call and you go, it's like, oh, them. I don't want to talk to that person right now. You're not motivated. The phone rings and you don't answer it. So you're still getting the prompt. Oh, the phone is in the other room and it's getting charged. And it's too far away. Or, someone's calling, but I turned the ringer off. So I actually didn't get the prompt. Right? So you can see how simple that is for this set behavior. If any one of these three elements is missing, that behavior won't happen. So you have to have all three of them come together. Typically, when I work with groups, people say, how do I increase motivation? How do I get people to do this thing? That's very, very difficult because motivation is variable like the weather, like my mood. I feel like Chinese food tonight. I feel like salmon tomorrow and maybe 3 times a week. Ability, on the other hand, is making something easy. All right, so when we talk about that, here we go. I love ability. So ability, this you can deconstruct. Do people have time to do the thing you want? Right? Do they have the money to do the thing they want? And money is elastic, and time is elastic. It's amazing how much time people have to devote to Game of Thrones and how little time they have to devote to recycling, right? You're going like, I was looking at my screen time on my phone yesterday, and I was shocked, because I've been traveling a lot, so that's my excuse, that I had spent 7 hours last week on Facebook. 7 hours. That's like a work day on Facebook. I didn't start the week with the intention that I'm going to devote one work day to Facebook. But it was really easy, okay? So, and it didn't require any brain cycles, right? So if you require people to think hard on something, that's going to add friction and they're not going to do it, right? But if you make it effortless, they will do it. Physical effort, well, we're lazy. Okay, so we're not going to do anything that requires us to get up. Social deviance, right? Well, so when we're talking about wellness and healthy food for Norwegians, salmon came up, but tacos did not. Because, well, Norwegians aren't Mexican, right? So we look at, identity as well. There's certain behaviors that we're going to do are going to be easier to do because I'm a guy, so I'm not going to do yoga. Or I'm a woman and I'm going to do this, right? And that factors in as well. So these are the things that you can look at. And of course, if it's non-routine, if you can't anchor that behavior in something that you already do, it's never going to happen. With the best of intentions, no matter how motivated we are, New Year's comes and we all want to have that bikini body by June. And where do I fit the gym in with children and work and commute and homework and everything else? It doesn't happen, right? So you have to anchor it in something that you're already doing it. So you all wanted me to talk about innovation culture. How do you apply this to innovation? Well, the innovation culture is something very aspirational. We want to be innovative. And I go, cool. What does that mean behaviorally? If a year from now I said we did a magic wand and you were able to become more innovative, what would be different about your organization? Tell me in as high resolution as possible. You get up, you go to work, and man, it's innovative. What are you doing differently? How are the conversations different? How are the meetings different? Storytell. And again, don't get fixated on it's not possible, we'll never change, or any of that. I want you to radically imagine this future. And you determine that indeterminate, is it 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, where you're more innovative. And when you start breaking down those behaviors, you go like, oh, well, the baby step is we have an outward orientation. I go, all right, cool, what does that mean? Well, that meant that I was able to go to 3 conferences outside of Norway this year. And they were in topics that didn't have anything to do with media, so I could open up my horizons and get new ideas. I go, that's concrete. That you can check off a list. Boom. Right? So the goal is always to get these things to be more concrete, and even innovation is comprised of things that we do. So I invite you to brainstorm with your organization, say, what would an innovative culture look like in a very, very tactical, tangible way? Like, are we reading different things? Really? What are you reading? Okay, let's start a book club. Are we listening to different music? Okay, let's start that now. Are we being innovative because we're feeding our novelty-seeking desires? And so it's like, okay, we're going to have radically different food in the canteen. All those things are going to keep you saying oh, that's new, that's novel, that's novel. The people who are most innovative, and when I was at IDEO, I learned this, we're like hip-hop artists. We remix, resample, appropriate, and create new IP from derivative work. Innovative people do that. A lot of times we think, I just need to come up with this new idea that no one ever has thought about before, and I'm just going to sit and think my way through innovation. Innovation is something that you do. It's not something that you think about. So consider this. All right, I've checked off innovation on my talk. Yay! So last but not least, you have to anchor it to existing behaviors. So if you already have a reading habit, how do you make a change in that reading habit? When I talk about wellness and fitness, for years and years and years, and I got out of the habit because of the travel, but I need to get back in. So I multitask. So I go okay, don't have time to go to the gym. What exercise, tiny exercise, can I do every day? So when I brush my teeth in the morning, I even do this in high heels, I do squats. Now, you do 40 squats twice a day because I brush my teeth in the morning and I brush my teeth at night. And you do it for 365 days, and you do it fairly consistently. Some of you, someone who can do math in their head, that's a lot of squats. It's a lot of squats. I'm telling you, it's a lot of squats, and it works. When the microwave is going for a minute in my kitchen and I have nothing to do, I find a counter, and I go like this. I do 10 of these, because I've learned in 60 seconds I could do 10. Do that every morning. All of a sudden, you're getting somewhere. The power of tiny habits, and this is like the compound interest of behavior. We tend to be very ambitious, overly ambitious, and then we crash and burn. The more powerful approach is to take these small Lego bricks of behaviors and put them together. Because over time, they have a much more powerful impact than the big ambitious thing that you flame out on. Okay. There, you got your tool and your tutorial on behavior design. So, I have a story. I call it Strangers in the Night. So, if I was to ask you, I have a friend who's coming from out of town, and he's a perfect stranger, but could you put him up for the night? How many of you would you raise your hands and say, yeah, he could sleep on my couch? Any of you? Would you volunteer? Okay, I said, but he would pay you like 100 euros. Would that be enough to get you to say, okay, I'm gonna have him on the couch, and there's my husband and there are my kids and all this other stuff? You go like, anyone? Like 2 of you? No, I don't do that. No way. Why would I do that? I don't know this person. They could be a serial killer. They could be a terrorist. They could just be a slob and make a mess of my house. Why would I allow this person in my house? Why would I do that? If we could change that, create a hospitality behavior where we would say we would open our home to someone, what would that impact be? Now imagine, what would it be worth it? Could you do this? If you could wave a magic wand and say, I want you all to engage in a hospitality behavior, all you Norwegians, and you go like, but we're introverts. We don't do that because we're Norwegian. It's like, okay, well, but if you should be extroverted for a night, for a perfect stranger, could you do that? And if you could get millions of people to engage in this trust behavior, because that's what it is. What is trust? Trust is aspirational, blah, 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 blah. But, a behavior around trust, what would that look like? You can get it at scale. We're talking like millions of people all over the world doing it. What would that look like? Well, crap. I know. You guys know. It's Airbnb. It's Airbnb. They have, this number is like, as of last year, valuation of $31 billion. If you can engage people in a trust behavior, that represents a business opportunity of $31 billion in valuation. They have 2 million listings. They're in 191 countries. So it's not just Americans who are doing this. 640,000 hosts. What I find interesting is that half the hosts are women. And if there's any demographic that is super, super sensitive to safety and security, it's women. So if you can get women to cross that trust threshold, they were able to earn $20 billion because they could do that. How did Airbnb design trust at scale? How did they do that? 5 years ago, Chris Bennett, so those of you who are at Stanford know Chris because he's my game designer. He and I did a design school course on designing for trust. It's like, how the hell? Because we were looking at this in 2013, 2014. This is really, really curious. You're getting people. It's one thing to say, I'm going to go stay at a Scandic. It's an ongoing business. They have employees. They have standards. You're going to stay in a hotel. It's not a big... You don't think, oh, what's the safety and security of the hotel? You don't worry about that because they have systems in place. But to go into someone's home is something else altogether. How many of you have ever used Airbnb? Do you remember when you first signed up for Airbnb? Okay, so they want to know who you are, what's your national identity, do you have a passport, do you have a credit card, you have all this stuff, right? So they're going through this whole process to decide whether or not they're going to let you in the club, right? Because Airbnb is a club. Not everybody who applies to get into Airbnb gets into Airbnb. And once you get in there, you better be a good actor, right? Because they have a bilateral reputation system. And so they have these layers of trust that's algorithmic. So when we talk about trust, we have these old notions of trust that are rooted in the real world. I need to look at you. I can't do business with you until I've actually met you. I'm Latin, and so we don't do business until we've had dinner and we've talked for 5 hours, right? We don't do contracts. It's like, who are you? Tell me about your family. We want to know all that business, right? But if you're going to have trust that scales with millions of people, that is too labor intensive. You just can't do it. So what we started realizing, and my slides is, yeah, there you go. It always happens. We're moving from an identification-based trust model, which is very tribal, right? Who are you? Oh, you're Norwegian, I'm Norwegian. Oh, you're from Trondheim, I'm from Trondheim. Oh, you did it. And then you go like, okay, paisanos, we're cousins, we're this. To do a calculus-based trust. A calculus-based trust is based on data. It's based on behavior. And that scales. Now, prior to Airbnb, if we could go back in time, for those of you who were alive in the 1960s, there was something that was set up that was called MasterCard. If we're talking about trust-based systems that scale, there are precedents in terms of financial services. Credit cards are amazing. I remember as a child when people would write a check at the grocery store and then someone would say, well, I don't know if this check is good or not. And then they came up with a card that would guarantee that the check was good. And now, of course, we use credit cards. And credit cards deal with dispute resolution. They make sure that both the customer and the merchant are treated fairly. They are that mediating technology that allows commerce to scale. Because they've been able to figure out how to design trust through these platforms. So, our tenet is that you can design trust, and you have to think about what those positive behaviors are. Now, nobody is perfect, and no system is perfect. And so the challenge, of course, is how do you constantly repair and recover when you have missteps? And of course, going back to our swarm of bees and our aspirational build trust, what are the specific behaviors that need to happen that in aggregate comprise trust? So in your industry, in media, what do you need to do to build trust, maintain trust with your stakeholders, with your customers? In this day and age, it's transparency, right? It's authenticity. It might be blockchain. Blockchain is a newfangled tech way of saying transparency. That's all it is. It's just a digital version of transparency. No big deal. So it has to be built, repaired, and reinforced. And if you do it properly, it can scale trust. The interesting thing about platforms like Airbnb is that it is in their business interest. It is integral to the success of their business that people have positive experiences, that they have safe experiences, and if they're lucky, have extraordinary experiences. And so everyone's incentivized to be good to each other. In this case, the objective of our lab, how good can we be to each other, makes solid business sense. And for any business that hopes to scale and requires network effects among people, you need to make sure that people can be good to each other. Because otherwise, if they start poisoning it, it becomes like a bad neighborhood that nobody wants to go to anymore. Right? It's like, I don't feel so good about it. I may not have had a personally bad experience in it, but I feel uncomfortable walking down the street. You don't want to create the digital equivalent of a bad neighborhood. So, I had an awesome conversation with some of you last night. And one of the things that we're talking about is that media has a role to play as a guardian of trust. In the United States, our media has been corrupted, and it has eroded trust. But I think that it doesn't have to be that way, because you can call truth to power. And that is more important than ever now. And more than that, you get to craft a story. So, one of the things we're doing is designing for safe and ethical technologies, and of course Google dropped their "Don't be evil" from their mission statement. Isn't that interesting? But one of the things that came up in conversation last night was how can media lead future technology innovation? So I used to be a venture capitalist, and now I've been at Stanford. And it's been really interesting because the stuff that gets created in the world is the stuff that gets funded. Okay? So this is what you need to know. What's been interesting to me to be at Stanford, because we are the engine for innovation in the world. We may not want to admit it, but we have to own it. If you look at the data, we over-index on innovation. So whatever new thing's going to come out, it's going to come from Stanford. Who directs and funds our innovation is either DoD, DOE, or industry sponsors. When the industry sponsors say, I want to pay faculty or a PhD student to pursue this, that sets the direction, the intellectual direction. What's interesting to me are the people who are missing in the room. Media's missing, labor's missing, advocacy groups are missing. The people who are most impacted by technology have no say in the direction. The people who are going to profit the most from technology do. If you want to change the direction that technology is going to go in, and this is my call to action to you, you need to start putting money down and saying, look, this is a technology that we need to have created so we can do our work better. 20 years ago, the CIA started a fund called InQtel in Silicon Valley. Why? Because they said intelligence organizations need the development of key technologies. And the only way we're going to get the attention of Silicon Valley is if we put money on the table and say, this is what we need. For your industry to not get disintermediated or destroyed by technology, you have to channel and guide it. You have to tell people, look, I need technology that's going to help us counter fake news. I need technology that is going to help us fight trolls, bots, and so on. You need to send, just as I'm looking for a market signal for the value of peace, you need to send a market signal for the value of media. And by doing that, you're going to incentivize people to go like, oh, you care about that. Okay, now that I know that that's a pain point in the marketplace, I'm going to innovate something around that. I'm going to solve that problem. But in the absence of that, other actors will set the agenda. So, and Steve Buscemi, that was creepy. That was really, really creepy. So, we know that any technology is going to be weaponized today. Any new technology, AI, IoT, deep learning, all of this can and will be weaponized. Know that. How do you deal with that? In Silicon Valley, we're like a drug company that doesn't go through clinical trials. We just put that shit out there and then we go, ooh, did somebody die? My bad. I'm just a platform provider. You know? We're looking to change this. So how do we design frameworks so we can detect the unintended use of technology? How can we see that? How do we look at AI so it doesn't perpetuate bias? We just have to assume that something's going to go south. So the question is, how do you instrument it as you would a clinical trial? So that way you could say, okay, yes, I lowered your blood pressure, but yeah, you're deaf now. Oops. But you know, your blood pressure's lower. That doesn't fly anymore. It really, really doesn't. And so we want to figure out how to do this. What media can do is when you're looking at new technology is that you can ask these questions as part of your storytelling and part of your investigative journalism. You could say, look, you got this new thing, but can you tell me what you're putting in place, proactively putting in place to detect whether or not this is going to be weaponized? And you can't, and don't accept the answer like, well, there's some bad actors and, you know, blah, 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 blah. No, you have to put the innovation culture, you have to call bullshit on it. I'm asking you to do this. I'm desperate for you to do this because you have the power to do this. So when I talk to people at Stanford, I go, you know, how many of you, and you see these stories in the media all the time, are looking forward to, you know, the robots and the AI overlords taking over and we're all going to be unemployed? How many of you are saying, hell yes, that's the future that I want? Anybody? Have you seen those creepy videos from Boston Robotics? And it's like, ugh, you know, and any of you go like, yes, I can't wait. That's the future that I want. Are any of you saying that? If none of us want that future, why are we allowing that to happen? If that's not the future that we want for our children, or much less for ourselves, why are we being passive and feeling that we have no agency around this? And you go like, well, because we're Norwegian and we're introverted and, you know, we're quiet. The time to be quiet is gone. It's done. If we want to create the world that we want, we need to radically imagine it. We need to radically tell different stories, as opposed to the usual dystopian Mad Max. It's all going to be, Elon Musk and Peter Thiel are all going to go to live on Mars, and the rest of us are going to be in this dystopia. It's going to be awful, and all the youth are going to be like jacked into the virtual reality because the real world is so awful. I have a 19-year-old son. That's not what I brought him into the world to have. When he's my age, God willing, the world is going to be good. We will have nature. We will have air. We will have flowers. We will have trees. But we have to aggressively defend that. I was talking to my son a couple weeks ago, checking in on him, and he says, well, I'm a bit of a nihilist, because, it doesn't matter, we're all going to die anyway. And it brought tears to my eyes, because I didn't know that it had gotten to that point. And I'm choking up again as I remember that, because I was going like, oh my God, how can you give up so soon? And so as we were walking, he's telling me about this and that, the other, and I go, but you know what, Ben, it doesn't matter, because we're all going to die anyway. And he'd tell me something else. I go, yeah, but who cares, because it doesn't matter, we're all going to die anyway. And he started looking at me very, very annoyed. And I said, this is what it's like to live with a nihilist. Because whatever you tell me, I'm just going to shoot it down, because why bother? This is very interesting, this new genre. It's called hope punk. How many of you are familiar with hope punk? A few of you? 1, 2? I love hope punk. I read that and I go, oh, that's me. Because to be a radical optimist in this day and age, in 2019, is an act of political defiance. It is saying, I'm not going to go along with the narrative. I choose to rewrite the future, and I'm going to proactively do things in the world that are going to lead to the vision that I want versus the vision that I'm being handed. For all of us, my call to action to you, as media, as storytellers, as investigative journalists, is to hold all of us to a higher standard, to call us on our behavior, and to provide examples of what the future could be. I am 5 minutes over, but thank you so very much for the opportunity to talk to you. I have one last thing, though, because, pictures didn't happen. I need a selfie with all of you. So let's see if I can do this. Na, 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 na. You got to wave. Okay, here we go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margarita. She will stay here until tomorrow, available for questions if you have any. I will start doing my 60 seconds of push-up every morning, eating salmon and trusting strangers from now on.